I didn't expect my marriage to end with one sentence, but that's exactly how it happened. We were standing in our kitchen when my husband, Daniel, glanced at me over his phone and said, "You really do look like somebody's grandmother these days, not a wife, not mine." No laugh, no softening, just the truth he'd been waiting to spit out. Then he told me he was flying to Greece with his secretary because he needed a break from this. And by this, he meant me. He packed that night, humming like a man who'd won something, never looking at me once. But I didn't break. A door inside me shut, quietly and permanently. And that's where my story actually begins. Before I go on, let me introduce myself properly. My name is Marian Doyle, and if you're listening right now, tell me where you're watching from. I've learned that women from all across the country, Florida, Montana, New Mexico, you name it, have lived different versions of the same story. And maybe you'll hear a piece of yourself in mine. I'm 68 years old, born in Pennsylvania, raised in Ohio, settled in North Carolina after Daniel's job moved us here nearly 20 years ago. I've spent most of my adult life supporting his ambitions, holding our home together, and keeping our marriage steady through the storms nobody else ever saw. For a long time, our home looked picture perfect from the outside. A modest brick house, a trimmed yard, a marriage that seemed stable. We weren't wealthy, not then, but we were comfortable, and we were partners. True partners. At least I thought so. But something changed when Daniel's business started doing well. He got a taste of success, and it went straight to his head. Calls started stretching into late evenings. Work dinners became routine. He bought a nicer car, then a pricier watch, then new suits. I didn't mind the spending. We could afford it. What bothered me was the way he carried himself, like he was rising and I was holding him down. Over the years, his words grew sharper. Little comments at first. "You never dress up anymore. Try not to look so tired when we go out. Lauren knows how to stay polished. You could learn from her." I brushed them off. Wives do that sometimes. We excuse the ugly things because we remember the good man he used to be. But the insult in the kitchen, that was something else. That was deliberate. That was a man who had already rewritten our marriage in his head and cast me as an inconvenience he was dragging behind him. When he walked out that door, suitcase rolling behind him, something inside me stopped begging to be seen. I didn't want him to look at me anymore. I wanted justice. I wanted dignity. And most of all, I wanted my life back. So when he boarded that plane with his secretary, he had no idea that the woman he left behind was not the same woman he spent years diminishing. He had no idea I was about to take everything he thought I was too weak, too old, too soft to handle. And this is where everything shifts. When Daniel's plane lifted off for Greece, the house felt unnaturally quiet. Not peaceful, just stripped. Like someone had walked through my life with a pair of scissors, cutting out pieces I didn't realize were holding me upright. I sat at the kitchen table that first night, staring at the empty chair across from me. And for the first time in years, I let myself tell the truth. Our marriage hadn't been fine for a long time. It had simply been functioning. People assume long marriages dissolve suddenly, but they don't. They erode in slow motion. A joke here, a dismissal there, a look that lasts too long, a silence that grows too heavy. My marriage to Daniel was no different. In the early years, we were solid. I met him when I was 22, working at a small insurance office. He was charming back then, steady, hardworking, ambitious in a grounded way. We built a life from scratch. First rental apartment, old furniture, hand-me-down dishes, weekend jobs to make ends meet. We raised 2 kids who grew into decent adults. We overcame the same hurdles most couples face: layoffs, hospital visits, tight Christmases, disagreements that lasted too long but eventually passed. Nothing about our story was dramatic. It was ordinary, familiar, American. But something in him shifted around his mid-50s when his business started to thrive. He began traveling more, dressing better, speaking with a tone that suggested he'd outgrown the life he built. It wasn't overnight. It was gradual, subtle enough that I didn't feel it fully until it pressed down on me. He started comparing me, casually, carelessly, to younger women he worked with. "You should try wearing your hair like hers. Lauren's very disciplined about her diet. You'd look great if you put in a bit of effort again." That last word, again, always stung, as if I'd somehow stopped being a woman and become a piece of old furniture he couldn't figure out how to throw away. I didn't recognize it as disrespect at first. I recognized it as aging, the kind no one warns you about, the kind where the person you devoted your life to starts treating time like it happened only to you. There were smaller moments, too, ones that didn't matter until, suddenly, they did. Like how he'd take phone calls in the other room, or how his business trips became conveniently longer, or how he always seemed slightly more alive when talking about work than anything at home. But the real shift, the one I couldn't ignore, came 3 months before the Greece trip. A friend of mine sent me photos she found online from one of Daniel's conferences. In 2 different pictures, Lauren, the secretary, stood right beside him, closer than any employee should be. Hand on his arm in one, laughing up at him in another. He didn't look uncomfortable. He looked proud. My stomach dropped, but still, I didn't accuse him. I didn't confront him. I didn't want to be the paranoid wife. Instead, I tucked the feelings down where I kept everything else. For later, for when I could think clearly. Then came the comments, the dismissiveness, the little smirks when I walked into a room, the way he seemed annoyed by my existence, like he was tolerating me until he could justify something else. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't want pity. I didn't want advice. I didn't want anyone saying, "Leave him," because after 32 years, leaving isn't a quick decision. It's a dismantling. It's a funeral for a life you built. But the Greece announcement, that tore whatever thread was holding me to the old version of him. I still remember the moment everything changed. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was me standing in our bathroom, looking at myself under the harsh vanity lights. I saw the lines around my mouth, the gray strands near my temples, the tiredness in my eyes. I touched my face gently and realized I didn't look old. I looked worn down, worn by him. I whispered out loud, "This isn't who I am." And just like that, something clicked. A firm, calm realization. I wasn't staying in this marriage because I loved him. I was staying because I forgot I had options. That night, I made myself tea, sat at the kitchen table, and opened the drawer where we kept our household files. I pulled out bank statements, mortgage documents, retirement accounts, business filings, every piece of paper that built our life. I had handled our finances for decades. I knew every login, every investment, every monthly bill, not because I was controlling, but because I was the one who cared. I kept the home running while he ran around building an identity outside it. Suddenly, the humiliation he threw at me that morning twisted into something sharper. Clarity. Daniel believed I was too soft to fight back, too old to start over, too dependent to stand alone. He didn't know me at all. By the time I finished sorting the paperwork, I had a plan. A quiet one, a legal one, a smart one. And it began the very next morning. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. Not out of anxiety, those days were behind me, but with a kind of steady purpose I hadn't felt in years. I made myself coffee, sat down at the table with the folder of documents I'd organized, and began treating my life like a business transaction. Not emotional, not personal, just necessary. The first call I made was to a family law attorney in town. Her name was Dana McAllister, and I had heard of her for years. Strong reputation, no theatrics, known for being efficient and brutally straightforward. When her receptionist offered to schedule me within the next 2 weeks, I firmly asked if anything was available sooner. 10 minutes later, I had a same-day appointment. I arrived early, not dressed up, not trying to look put together. I wore what I always wear: jeans, a clean blouse, and the same small silver earrings I've had since my 40th birthday. I wasn't there to impress anyone. I was there to reclaim what I had built. Dana greeted me with a firm handshake, a legal pad under her arm, and the kind of eyes that read a person in seconds. She didn't offer sympathy or small talk, and I appreciated that. She simply said, "Tell me why you're here." So I did. I told her about the insult in the kitchen, the grease trip, the secretary, the shift in his attitude, the photos, the finances. I didn't embellish, didn't dramatize, didn't cry. I gave her facts. 32 years worth. When I finished, she tapped her pen and said one sentence that changed the entire tone of the room. "You're in a stronger position than you realize." She explained everything clearly, without sugarcoating or jargon. Our house was titled jointly, but primary residence rights mattered. Our investments were marital assets, meaning I had equal authority. Our retirement accounts, despite being in his name, were legally shared. Any separation filed now would freeze new debts and protect existing assets. And, this was the part he would never expect, I had the right to request the title transfer under our state's protection statutes while proceedings were pending. I listened, nodding slowly, absorbing every line as if she were teaching me a new language. When she asked whether I had access to our accounts, I told her the truth. I handled our finances for 30 years. Her eyebrows lifted just slightly. "That will make this a lot easier." She slid a set of papers toward me. "We can begin separation proceedings today, quietly. He won't be notified until filings are processed." It wasn't revenge. It wasn't spite. It was self-preservation. I signed what needed signing. Next came the practical steps, unromantic, unglamorous, but powerful. I went home and opened our online banking. I moved half of our joint savings into an account in my name only as instructed, entirely legal. I closed out a credit card he rarely used but was technically under my SSN. I notified our insurance provider of temporary separation, securing my coverage. Then I dealt with the house. Our mortgage had been refinanced 2 years prior. I remembered that the refinancing allowed for a title modification if necessary. I pulled the papers, scanned them, and sent them to Dana's office. By late afternoon, she had filed the request. It wasn't dramatic. There was no drum roll, no cinematic music, just an email with the subject line, "Title transfer initiated." I stared at it for a long moment, not in disbelief, just in quiet recognition. The house I had poured my life into, the one I painted, furnished, cleaned, maintained, while he traveled and entertained coworkers. It was finally coming back to the person who actually valued it. While I waited for confirmations, I walked through the rooms, not to mourn anything, but to assess. His office was cluttered with magazines, old receipts, perfume samples from who knows where, and clothing tags I didn't recognize. I boxed everything with his name on it, neatly, without emotion. In the master bedroom, I removed only what belonged to him. Ties, watches, cologne he drowned himself in before every work dinner. I placed it all in a single suitcase and set it by the front door. That was the moment the house felt lighter. Not empty, lighter. Like a weight had been removed quietly without argument. By the time evening rolled around, I had filed for separation, secured my finances, initiated the house title transfer, documented every step, packed his belongings, logged every action for legal clarity. Every move was clean, lawful, traceable, and entirely in my control. While I finished the last of my tea, I received a message from Daniel, a selfie of him on a plane, sunglasses on, smiling, Lauren in the corner of the frame pretending not to be seen. The caption said, "Try not to mess anything up while I'm gone." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. By the time his flight landed, everything he took for granted was already shifting under his feet. The first few days after Daniel left were strangely calm. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was tiptoeing around someone else's moods. No sighs from across the room, no passive-aggressive comments, no weight pressing down on me the moment I woke up. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was productive. Every morning I woke up with a small list of things to accomplish. Nothing dramatic, nothing theatrical, just steps forward. Practical, adult steps that made sense for a woman taking control of her life after too much time spent shrinking herself. Meanwhile, Daniel was living his dream vacation, or at least he pretended to. He sent the kids pictures of beaches and plates of seafood as if he needed an audience for his new adventure. I didn't get any messages like that. I only received quick, dismissive updates. Made it to Athens. Don't forget to pay the landscaper. Try not to stress yourself out while I'm gone. That last one made me laugh out loud. Stress? He had no idea how much calmer my days had become without him. But cracks started showing in his perfect little trip almost immediately. On the third day, I got a call, not from him, but from our joint credit card company. They wanted to confirm a series of unusually large charges made overseas. I authorized the ones I recognized, flagged the ones I didn't, and calmly followed Dana's earlier instructions. Because once separation is filed, joint spending becomes a liability issue. His romantic getaway with the secretary suddenly didn't have an unlimited budget behind it. That same evening, he called. I let the phone ring twice before answering. "Why are my cards acting up?" he demanded, irritated, like I was an employee who'd ruined his schedule. In the background, I heard Lauren's voice, high and whining. "Tell them we need this reservation. Tell them—" I kept my voice level. "Your attorney will explain anything you need to know." There was a beat of stunned silence. He wasn't used to being redirected. He definitely wasn't used to me doing it. "What attorney?" he snapped. "You'll receive the paperwork soon," I said. "For now, your access is adjusted according to state law." "State law?" he repeated, as if I'd spoken in another language. I didn't elaborate. I didn't soothe. I simply said, "I hope you enjoy the rest of your trip," and hung up. After that, the messages shifted. First came the condescending ones. "You're being dramatic. This is unnecessary. You're overreacting to a joke." Then the irritated ones. "I can't book anything. Why did the hotel say there's an issue? Fix this." Then slowly the panicked ones. "Call me. We need to talk. Answer your phone." I didn't reply to any of them. I wasn't being cruel. I was simply done being his safety net. While his vacation unraveled, my life settled into something steady and strangely satisfying. I began walking every morning, circling our neighborhood while the sun was still low, not to lose weight or impress anyone, just to breathe fresh air without feeling guilty for taking up space. I stopped skipping breakfast. I stopped apologizing to myself for being tired or needing rest. I cleaned out rooms that hadn't been truly organized in years. I opened the windows. I let the house smell like citrus cleaner and fresh air instead of Daniel's cologne that clung to every hallway. I also rekindled friendships I'd slowly abandoned because Daniel never liked my friends. He said they were too loud or too nosy, when in reality they simply had opinions. Women my age always do. We've earned them. My friend Linda came over with homemade peach cobbler one afternoon. She took one look around and said, "This house feels different." "It is different," I answered. We didn't discuss the Greece situation much. Women our age know how to read silence. They know when not to pry. They know when a woman is rebuilding herself piece by piece. The beauty of those days was the clarity. I wasn't reinventing myself. I wasn't trying to be younger or prettier or more desirable. I was just finding the woman I tucked away to keep a man comfortable. But Daniel? His trip continued downward. He called again a week in, this time from what sounded like a busy street in Athens. "This place said my card is declined," he barked. "This is humiliating. What did you do?" "I followed legal advice," I replied calmly. "Everything happening now is within the law." "You're punishing me," he said. "No," I said. "I'm protecting myself." He inhaled sharply, offended in a way only men who never expected consequences can be. Then he ended the call. I knew then that the power dynamic had shifted, not through revenge, not through anger, through simple, grounded action, through the truth catching up to him. By the time his 2-week trip was coming to an end, I felt stronger, not newer, not different, just restored. My voice was steady, my sleep deeper, my mind clearer. And somewhere on the other side of the world, Daniel was preparing for a return he didn't realize would be the end of the life he took for granted. His downfall didn't need a catastrophe, it just needed accountability. And accountability was waiting for him on my front porch. Daniel came home on a Thursday afternoon. I knew the minute his rideshare pulled into the driveway because I felt the shift in the house. Not fear, not dread, just the end of something I'd already stepped out of. I watched him from the front window as he got out of the car. He looked irritated, sunburned, and older than when he left. Not older in the natural way. Older in the way a man looks when the world has stopped catering to him for a moment. He reached for his house keys with a kind of entitled confidence, the same way he'd done 1,000 times. But when he tried the door, the lock didn't budge. He rattled it harder, then harder again, then paused, confused. He knocked loudly. "Marion, the lock is jammed!" I opened the door, not timidly, not triumphantly, simply calmly. "The locks were changed," I said, "legally." He blinked at me like I had spoken Greek instead of English. "What do you mean, legally?" "I filed for separation," I said plainly. "The house is under my exclusive residential rights. Your attorney has the paperwork." He threw his hands up. "You're being ridiculous. This is our house." I didn't argue. I didn't need to. Instead, I stepped aside and pointed to the small suitcase I had packed weeks earlier, his belongings neatly folded and placed by the door. "You can take this," I said. "Anything else will be handled through your attorney." His face turned a shade darker. "You had no right to touch my things." "I had every right," I replied, still calm. "The law supports the primary resident spouse maintaining the home during separation. You abandoned residence when you left for Greece." He hated hearing his own actions spoken back to him so plainly. He tried a different tactic, the one he used whenever he wanted to regain control. He softened his voice. "Marion, come on, let's not do this. I know you're hurt. I shouldn't have said what I said that day. It was a joke." "A joke you meant," I said. He didn't deny it. He sighed dramatically. "Look, I just needed a break. You take everything so seriously, and I didn't leave. I just wanted space." "Space you filled with your secretary," I answered. His jaw tightened. "You've been talking to people." "No," I said. "I've been paying attention." He huffed, running a hand through his hair. "Okay, fine. I admit I handled things poorly. But this..." He gestured toward the locked door, the packed suitcase. "This is extreme." I stepped outside and closed the door behind me, leaving the house safely secured behind my back. "This isn't extreme," I said evenly. "This is accountability." He scoffed. "Don't talk to me like you're some kind of saint. You've lived off my hard work for years." That was when I saw it clearly. The man he had become. Not stressed, not lost, just arrogant, assumptive, blind to the labor that holds a marriage together when one partner stops contributing to anything but his own ego. "I didn't live off your hard work," I said. "I supported it. I raised our kids. I kept the home functioning. I managed every bill, every repair, every obligation. While you built your success, I built the life that allowed you to pursue it." He didn't like the truth. Men who rely on unpaid labor rarely do. He forced a laugh. "So what now? You think you can just cut me out of everything?" I handed him a sealed envelope. Inside were copies of the filings, the separation documents, the financial statements, the title transfer confirmation, the asset division notes. He flipped through them quickly. The more he read, the tighter his mouth became. "This is insane," he muttered. "You're doing this because I said you look like someone's grandmother?" "No," I said. "I'm doing this because you stopped treating me like your wife years ago, and because I finally realized you thought I'd never do anything about it." He stepped closer, lowering his voice as if proximity would regain power. "You're going to regret this." I looked him straight in the eye. "I regret staying silent for as long as I did. Nothing else." For a moment, the only sound was the wind moving through the trees. Then something unexpected happened. One of our neighbors, Mr. Jacobs, stepped out of his yard holding his mail. He'd clearly heard the raised voices. He didn't stare rudely. He just paused long enough for Daniel to realize someone was watching. Public embarrassment is a bitter pill for men like him. Daniel swallowed hard. "Give me my keys," he demanded quietly. "They're invalid," I replied. "Your attorney will arrange supervised access for anything you need." His face twisted, caught between outrage and disbelief. He grabbed the suitcase, nearly tripping over the bottom step, and stormed toward the car. He didn't slam the door. He didn't shout. He just drove off with the look of a man who finally understood he no longer had control over the life he took for granted. I watched his car disappear down the street. The air felt lighter. The house behind me felt like mine for the first time in decades, not out of spite, out of peace. The evening after Daniel drove away, I stood in the center of the living room and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Stillness. Not the uncomfortable silence of an unhappy marriage, but genuine quiet. The house didn't feel tense. It didn't feel cramped. It just breathed. I made myself a cup of tea, sat on the couch, and listened to the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of cicadas outside. Ordinary noises, but they felt different now. They sounded like mine. I didn't spend the night replaying the confrontation or second-guessing myself. I didn't wonder if I had been too harsh or too cold. I simply existed in my own home without walking on emotional eggshells. That alone was more relief than I expected. The next morning, an email from my attorney waited in my inbox. Clean, factual, and confirming everything was on track. The title transfer was progressing, the filings were moving through the system, and the temporary financial protections were active. No drama, no surprises, just the quiet machinery of the legal process doing what it was supposed to do. I read the email twice, then closed my laptop with a calm exhale. I had done everything right. Every step was above board, advised, documented, and legal. I hadn't acted out of emotion. I had acted out of clarity. Meanwhile, Daniel was discovering the consequences of believing he was untouchable. He called that afternoon twice. I let both calls go to voicemail. When I finally listened later, his tone had changed again. Voicemail number 1. "Marion, we need to talk. You're blowing this out of proportion. Call me back." Voicemail number 2. "I don't understand what the bank is saying. Why is there a freeze? What is all this paperwork? I need answers." He still spoke like I was the household manager who owed him explanations. I didn't respond. Boundaries aren't built with yelling. They're built with silence. 2 days later, I received a message from Dana. He had contacted an attorney. His legal counsel would now communicate with her office. Good. That was exactly how it needed to be. No emotional confrontations, no sudden appearances at my door, no dramatic scenes, just professionals handling a situation that should have been addressed years earlier. Around this time, bits and pieces of Daniel's post-Grease aftermath trickled back to me through quiet channels. Not gossip, just the natural way small towns absorb information. His secretary, Lauren, had returned home separately. Their little romantic escape had apparently fizzled the moment financial strain entered the picture. Travel looks glamorous until the man paying the bills suddenly can't. Within a week, she stopped returning his calls. Word spread that she had already updated her resume. Daniel wasn't used to instability. He wasn't used to being the one left behind. And he certainly wasn't used to consequences unfolding without anyone trying to rescue him. Back at home, my own life continued quietly. I rearranged the pantry, cleaned out the garage, donated clothes I hadn't worn in years, washed every window in the house. None of it was symbolic. I wasn't trying to stage a rebirth. I was just taking responsibility for the space that belonged to me now. I cooked smaller meals, ones I actually enjoyed instead of the heavy dishes Daniel always demanded. I went to the grocery store when I felt like it. Not when he criticized the pantry. I started reading in the evenings again, something I had abandoned because he always turned the TV up too loud. Every task felt steady, grounded, like rediscovering a rhythm I didn't realize I'd lost. I also slept better, not deeper, just cleaner, without tension settling in my shoulders, without wondering when the next sarcastic remark would come, without bracing myself for his moods. It was remarkable how quickly peace settled in once the source of unrest was gone. Near the end of the week, I received one more voicemail from Daniel. This one was different, quieter, deflated, edged with a hint of panic he was trying to hide. "Marion, I don't know what you're thinking, but this isn't right. The accounts are different. The investments, everything's changed. I don't know what you're planning, but you can't just take everything. We built this together." That line, "we built this together," would have angered me once. But now, I only felt clarity. He didn't mean we built this together. He meant I built it, and you supported me like a shadow. He still hadn't realized how much of his stability was built on the quiet, relentless work I did behind the scenes. I deleted the voicemail, not out of spite, out of closure. By Sunday, a full week after his return, everything was in motion. My legal position was solid, my home was secure, my finances were protected, and Daniel was learning that abandonment comes with consequences, especially when the woman you underestimated stops absorbing the damage. I didn't need revenge, I didn't need drama, I didn't need an apology, I just needed my dignity back, and I had it. The final chapter was waiting, simple, clean, and deserved. The final stretch of the separation process didn't arrive with dramatic fireworks or emotional outbursts. It came with paperwork, signatures, and the steady unfolding of consequences Daniel never believed would reach him. A month after he returned from Greece, I sat across from my attorney in her quiet office while she went through the finalized terms. The window beside her desk overlooked the courthouse lawn, where leaves had started turning. It was an ordinary day, one of those calm, mid-season mornings where the world feels steady. Dana glanced through the file she had assembled and said, "Everything came through. You're fully protected." Protected. A word no one had offered me in years. She reviewed each point carefully, ensuring I understood. The house, fully mine. The joint investments liquidated and divided according to law, with my share secured. The retirement accounts split fairly and in my favor due to my years of unpaid domestic labor. Temporary support, approved until the full settlement. Debt responsibility, shifted away from me entirely. There was no drama in her voice, no sympathy, just the clear tone of a woman delivering the outcome I had earned through calm, consistent action. "Do you have any questions?" she asked. "Just one," I said. "Is it over?" She closed the folder. "Yes, it's over." When I left her office, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel sad. I felt neutral, balanced, like a scale that had finally leveled after years of leaning too far to one side. I drove home with the windows down, letting cool air move through the car. It was the first time in a long time that I realized I wasn't rushing anywhere, wasn't bracing for anyone's mood, wasn't trying to predict someone else's reactions. I was just driving home to a house that belonged to me.